In January of 1915, Ernest Shackleton's ship, Endurance, became encased in the ice in the Weddell Sea. Through determination, grit, and savvy, Shackleton would lead his men through a brutal winter, then over hundreds of miles of Antarctic ice, followed by 800 miles across some of the roughest waters in the world. It is one of the most extraordinary and inspirational journeys in the history of exploration. Find this story and many others at the Explorers Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts or at explorerspodcast.com.
Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 578, Operation Oration. Last time, we took a slight detour to see how the Allies were further reducing the supplies coming to Von Arnim and his remaining Axis troops, now bottled up in northeastern Tunisia. Tied to Operation Flax was the reduction of the air defenses on Sicily, the next target. But one thing at a time. Tunisia had to fall. The further north General Messa moved his 1st Italian Army, the more airfields in central Tunisia became accessible to the Allies. Soon, Allied bombs and bullets were dropping on the Axis troops, and now that the war in Tunisia had shifted to this next phase, CNC Alexander was working on the next attack plan, whereas Von Arnim had so little fuel he could only focus on defense and local counterattacks. As for receiving anything more, the Allies had put an end to that. And as for perhaps retreating to Sicily, Hitler had already put the kibosh on that talk. The lopsided numbers continued. Now Alexander also had the 1st and 4th British Infantry Divisions. They had arrived in April, and the CNC had put them into the line to gain them some experience. As for the Americans, the losses they had sustained had been made good, and the French were back with American weapons. In all, Alexander now had 19 divisions, including 3 armored, to Von Arnim's 15 divisions, who were running out of everything. Lastly, Alexander had about 1,000 tanks, Von Arnim about 150. But the question for the local Allied commander was how to finish this without too much loss of life while getting it done by the time the chiefs of staff said so. They wanted May 1st, so the invasion of Sicily could kick off. The planning for Operation Vulcan, the final battle for Tunisia, had been in front of the staff of the 18th Army Group since February. Their first draft did not have the Americans involved, specifically the 2nd U.S. Corps, for a few valid reasons. First, the logistics teams involved had made it clear, we can do no more than support the British units who will be doing the fighting. Next, the roads around here will not hold up to such heavy traffic. And finally, let the British finish off Von Arnim. That way the Americans have more time to train, to be ready for Sicily. But when General Omar Bradley heard that the Americans would have no place in the final battle, he was uncharacteristically upset. He spoke with Patton. They commiserated together. Then Bradley flew to Algiers to complain directly to Eisenhower. As 2nd U.S. Corps now belonged to Bradley, this was his fight. The Supreme Commander heard Bradley out and then spoke to Alexander, saying, the Americans had to have a place in this last battle. We've sacrificed so much. Alexander agreed and would give the 2nd U.S. Corps its own objective. They were to take Bizerte. The problem was moving them to the north, closer to the coast, as their journey would have them cutting across the 1st British Army's supply lines. Still, this was approved, and Bradley showed his mettle by moving his men to their assembly points at Jebel Aboid and Beha without disrupting British supplies, and he had supplied his force as well using those third-rate roads the British engineers were complaining about. When Eisenhower stated America's case to Alexander, there really wasn't a chance the CNC was going to say no. He wanted the extra help. It had truly been a logistical issue. But now that that had been worked out, the Americans would be present when the Axis forces in Africa surrendered. Heady stuff. But when Ike pushed to make sure that his countrymen would be involved, that was nothing compared to the British officers who were also jockeying to be the one to deliver the death blow to the enemy. Thus, Monty, really liking the limelight, wanted to keep it going. So he had written to Alexander in early April, "I suggest a decision is required as to who plays the major part in the final assaults on the enemy's last positions. There seems to be two alternatives. A, 8th Army does it. In this case, I must move forward using all my divisions and phase up to a real battle on the Infidaville position. In this case, I would have to have at my disposal all the resources in northern Tunisia. Or B, 1st Army does it. In this case, I will sit tight and merely exert pressure. On no account must we split our effort and launch 2 or 3 thrusts, none of which can be sustained. Presumably you will decide if it's to be A or B." Alexander, probably smiling as he read this, could now read between Monty's lines, and he did not hesitate to reply. His message said, "Main effort in next phase will be by 1st Army. Preparations already well advanced for attack. Earliest date, 22nd April. Most suitable area for employment armor is in plain west of Tunis, so I require 1 armored division and 1 armored C regiment to join 9th Corps from you as early as can be arranged. Hope you can develop maximum pressure against Infidaville position to fit in with 1st Army attack." So, that was that. The 1st British Army was to have the honor. On April 12th, Alexander issued his plans for Operation Vulcan, the capture or destruction of Von Arnim's army. By this point, Monty's 8th Army was nearing Infidaville along the coast, about 35 miles south of Tunis. But now that the orders were out there was nothing Monty could do to steal the limelight. He and his had their orders. Operation Vulcan called for the 1st British Army to attack to the east and capture Tunis, while Omar Bradley's 2nd Corps would cover the 1st British Army's left flank and then turn to capture Bizerte. This left Monty's army to demonstrate and get the attention, hopefully, of the enemy's reserves, pulling them to the south. So from north to south, this was the lineup of Alexander's army. Along the northern coast was the Corps Franc d'Afrique. Then below them was the 2nd U.S. Corps. Then below them was the British 5th Corps. Then below them was the 10th Corps, and then the 19th French Corps, and finally turning and touching the east coast was Monty's 8th Army. Not that the Axis defending units in front of each of these forces was equal in ability. The 1st British Army would use their numbers to outflank the enemy where they could, contain them where they could not. Their main idea was to converge on the town of St. Cyprian from different directions, and that was located just west-southwest of Tunis. To reach that point in numbers was to cut off the port city from any help. Making this a bit easier, General Coltz's 19th French Corps would be on the 1st Army's right flank, mopping up the area between the British 1st and 8th Armies. The Americans certainly had their work cut out for them, as much as they wanted to be in this fight, as they had to take on the division Manteufel, named after its aggressive leader, and the 334th Division, and both of these units were amongst the hills. To be able to move on the northern road to Bizerte, the U.S. troops would have to take the hills, labeled green and bald, along the way. Bradley's other assignment was the center road, which had Hill 609, with, again, Germans on it. But even after this, the open range between the Americans and the British units on their right had to be secured by Bradley's men, despite the fact that it was all but impossible to hide any movement here. Given all this, Bradley wisely adopted the "sweat saves blood" motto. He would have his men climb up and down along the mountain ranges, thereby outmaneuvering the enemy versus exchanging shells or lives with them while going along the road. Specifically, General Eady's 9th Division would go around Hill's Green and Bald, and they would be helped by the Corps Franc du Afrique to their north along the coast. Meanwhile, General Allen's 1st U.S. Division would work on the hills near Sidi Nazir and the road that led to the Wadi Tyne Valley. This valley would have to be traversed to reach Bizerte, so of course, it was sown with enemy mines and had anti-tank guns covering it from the south, again in the hills. Bradley was expected to clear this out as well, so received General Harmon's 6th Armored Infantry to help. Once a path was cleared through the Tyne Valley and the defenses south of it were outmaneuvered, Harmon's heavy tank combat commands would pour through, turn north, and make for Bizerte. As for now, General Ryder's 34th Division, in between the 9th and 1st Infantry U.S. Divisions, would act as a reserve. Then there was Monty on the far right, still trying to think of a way to get to Tunis first. And you can't blame him. That his men felt the same way is a credit to them. They wanted to take the fight to the enemy. And thus, Operation Oration was born. 8th Army's collective hope was that General Mess's men would be so demoralized that 8th Army would be able to not only capture them, but still be able to send mobile units further north on the double towards Tunis. As for formally covering his ass, when Monty's advanced units reached Evitaville and faced another defensive line, he wrote to Alexander, "All my troops are in first-class form and want to be in the final Dunkirk." But for all that, Alexander would approve Operation Oration, the breaking of this defensive line, but not pushing on to Tunis. Problem was, the Evitaville line, like the Wadi Akarit line, was based on a series of hills. But behind these hills was not an open plain like before. Here, the two dorsal ranges came together to keep going into the Cape Bon Peninsula. Thus, the landscape behind the initial fighting would still be among more hills, which is why Alexander said no. Fortunately, or not, there were 3 roads from this hill-laden hell that went to the north. The coast road, blocked by anti-tank obstacles, and the 90th Light Division, which was sitting upon a jebel or a height. The central road that ran through the heights as well and went to the town of Tankaruna. The third, the most western road, ran into the sector that the French were to be responsible for, and again, those defending troops would also have their own jebel. As Operation Vulcan was only days away, Monty told General Horrocks that he had until then to push General Mess's forces off the line. Further, Monty didn't think there was much in their way. Probably 8 German battalions and the Italians, who he thought were ready to surrender. But Horrocks was his own man and simply did not take the word of someone else, even if it was his commanding officer. So, playing it safe, Horrocks worked out his own attack plan. He would have the New Zealanders storm the center road and take the town of Tankaruna. Meanwhile, Lieutenant General Francis Tucker's 4th Indians would climb the jebel along the westernmost road and clear it out, as they had done back on Ras Zuni, then swing far to the right towards the coast and cut off the respected and feared 90th Light Division from retreating. To keep the attention of the 90th Light Division front and center, General Lee's 50th Division would be on the far Allied right across from the 90th, again keeping them pinned down and hopefully keeping their eyes front. The 7th Armored Division would be on the Allied far left, doing the same thing, making lots of noise and their presence known. That would hopefully distract the enemy. It was a good plan, but it was an undermanned plan, as Freiberg and Tucker's divisions only had 2 brigades each, and they would be going with no pack transport and no artillery. Basically, the gamble was their presence alone would scare the enemy out of their positions. It would not. To be sure, there were always skirmishes up and down the line, as units were ordered to test the response of the enemy in front of them, but on April 19th, Monty got on with trying to draw the enemy reserves to himself and perhaps hoping for the enemy's line to collapse. Operation Oration had begun. First came the artillery barrage on the various positions near the 3 roads, and starting with the best outcome, even before the Allies moved out, the Italian troops on the initial defensive lines moved back due to the artillery. Seeing this, the 50th Northumbrian Division, though not expecting to attack that day, was ordered forward, with most of their work being done by the artillery, and they managed to capture Envidaville along the coast. They had to carve their way through the Italian 16th Motorized Division, but it was done. Meanwhile, in the center, the 2nd New Zealand Division charged for the town of Tankruna after crossing a height, which turned out to be the hardest part of their day. The town was taken by 2 prongs of New Zealanders coming at the enemy's flanks. The vital hills nearby were also taken, but beyond that, the Axis line held. As for the men of the 4th Indian Division on the far left, they once again climbed up a height the Italians thought was impossible. Still, once they reached the top at the southern end, the Italians did stand their ground. The good news for Von Arnim was his men still held the northern half of the top. The bad news, for every man he lost was a lost man. There were no replacements, whereas Alexander had no problem on that score. But for these victories, the 8th Army had not achieved a big breakthrough. Still, Monty would let it play out one more day, should something break his way. Yet what came Monty's way was a series of Axis counterattacks. The Italians tried to retake Envidaville. They failed, but this fighting created many casualties on both sides. The same scenario played out in other spots along the line. The Axis charged, but could retake nothing, with both sides spilling blood. Counter to Monty's prediction that the enemy troops, certainly the Italians, would be suffering from low morale, both the Germans and the Italians had fought tenaciously, as they saw this as their last-ditch stand. Then Monty was informed by Ultra that the Axis position here was to be more or less abandoned by Rome and Berlin. Oh, not in their press statements, but in how they were no longer risking much to resupply Von Arnim. So Monty called off Oration at the end of April 21st. Why spill the blood when this was all but over? Not until April 28th would 8th Army try again, motivated by the start of Vulcan, which had commenced on April 22nd. Not that his latest attack went according to plan either. Monty got the inexperienced 56th London Division, which had just arrived from Iraq, after a 32-day, 3,200-mile trip. And like the Americans before them, they were able to capture their given objectives through enthusiasm, but they did not know yet how to hold them from counterattacks. By now, Monty, who had backed off pushing his men, had been busy planning the British part of the attack on Sicily. And it was probably that space from the fighting that allowed him to look at the maps and figure out there was no way 8th Army was going to be the first to reach Tunis. So, on April 30th, he called off his attacks again and asked Alexander to come to his headquarters. But first, back to Operation Vulcan, set to kick off on April 22nd. The Axis knew that something like this was going to happen, so dipped into their bag of tricks and found a spoiling attack, which they launched on April 20th.
This October, Fanatics Casino is taking generosity to a whole new level. Download the app and start spinning. Supercharge your spin with a wager to unlock bigger prizes and a guaranteed win. And this October, we're turning supercharged spins up to the max. We've got $4 million in casino rewards and a $25,000 fan cash jackpot that rolls over every day until it's won. Fanatics Casino, America's fastest growing online casino. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Offer not available in all states. Terms apply. See Fanatics Casino app.
Von Arnim believed that the main Allied attack would come near Medjerda, in the center of the line and along the Gubalat Plain, just south of center, either because this was the shortest route to Tunis or because the plain there would allow for fast movement. Thus, the 334th Division was placed above the Medjez Road, the Hermann Goering Division south of it. And it would be here that the coming spoiling attack would take place. It was to be called Operation Lilac Blossom, which opened up during the night of April 20th. Its target was 5th Corps, in the center of the Allied line around the town of Medjez, to the northwest of Monty's Operation Oration. 5th Corps was made up of the experienced 78th Division, but also the inexperienced 1st and 4th British Divisions. So panzers from the 10th Panzer with Tiger tanks and infantry from the 1st Hermann Goering Division moved out. And however it happened, they managed to surprise the British units in front of them and quickly carve out a chunk of Allied territory 12 miles wide by 5 miles deep. Again, this was mostly due to the surprise, but the Germans then outsmarted themselves. Covering ground fast now in their panzers and trucks, the Germans then ran into the beefed-up lines of the Allies, who had plenty of artillery and plenty of ammunition, as they were just a day away from launching Vulcan. The German panzers and trucks turned around, but were already being hit by shells. Those that were able to retreat then noticed that their trouble was only beginning, as soon there were Churchill tanks and British infantry in trucks chasing them. At the end of Lilac Blossom, the Allies had lost 4 Churchill tanks, the Germans 2 Tiger tanks, but the Hermann Goering Division lost at least 327 men. The spoiling attack had failed, and now the Axis were that much weaker than they had been. It had been the British 5th Corps that stopped this spoiling attack, and then they went right into Vulcan's pre-attack attack. Their goal was to retake the heights of Jebel al-Amera, Sidi Ahmed Ridge, and Jebel Rar, together known as the Long Stop, which the Germans had taken from them 4 months earlier, when Brigadier Cass's 11th Brigade had to retreat from Terboba. These heights on the left of the road had to be cleared before 5th Corps could pour through with their tanks. But history remembers these heights as the Long Stop for a reason. For the 5th Corps, the fight was just starting. Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So, we're into the final battle, and everybody wants to be a part of it, and everybody wants to be noticed, which is all too human. So, no judgment here. It's just, vanity, which everybody is guilty of. So, anyways, I'd like to thank my latest member, Ethan Edie. Let's go with Edie, right, Ethan? Okay. So thank you very much for becoming a member. And he also donated. So Ethan, thank you very much. As far as other donations, let's see here. There was Matt Tonello and Steve Whitby. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And so we'll see how this plays out. We'll see what the Axis can do. Hopefully this is not a spoiler, but they're going to put up a fight because it's either this or they're either going to die or be defeated. So stiff resistance is going to be certainly in the next episode. Take care, everyone.